Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, April the 2nd already, the 93rd day of the year. There are 273 days left in the year 2024. Welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Thom. Well, women's basketball has arrived, that's for sure. It became appointment television last night to watch LSU and Iowa. It's on the same level as the men's game, it seems. Juju, Clark, Angel Reese, Flau'jae Johnson, Paige Bueckers are all becoming household names in women's basketball, and they've gotten pretty much on a par with men's basketball. We'll see how that come out later on in the week. The collapsing of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore was and is quite a tragedy. The loss of life, the millions and millions of dollars to rebuild, the time it's going to take, the problems that will occur along the way, and that list just goes on and on and on. However, I don't know if any of you saw the press conference briefing that the governor of Maryland gave a couple of days after the incident. It was absolutely one of the best professional summaries I've ever seen. What needs to be done, how it will unfold, nationwide supply chain issues, time guesstimates, construction factors, and the support of not just the people from his state, but it's going to require cooperation and some unity from all of the United States. The Port of Baltimore receives more than 800,000 imported vehicles every year, making it the largest auto import hub in the United States and a critical part of the global automotive supply chain. The governor ended his call for action, cooperation, and support with the saying, "Maryland tough, Baltimore strong." I believe him. Hopefully they will recover. Our G-list guest today is my good friend Paul South. Paul is a veteran journalist who across an award-winning career has covered everything from college football to Congress to Hurricane Katrina. I look forward to our discussion. Our show today, of course, is sponsored by the Best Girl Consulting Firm. Let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
Best Girl customizes the solution that fits your needs. So let's get to our roundtable regulars and me, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. Good morning, Barbara Wallace Edwards. How are you?
Good morning, Thom. I'm doing so much better than I was last week. Thank God.
How are you? Better. I think I'm doing better as well.
Good.
I don't think mine was quite as bad as yours. Right?
Yeah. It took about a week for me to get through this. And I'm, like I said, still not 100% yet, but I am so much better than I was last week. Thank goodness.
What's going on in your world besides being sick?
Yeah, well, Easter, we had a wonderful Easter weekend. I get a chance to spend some time with family members. My sister-in-law, Jackie, invited me over for dinner, and my niece, Jasmine, and her family was there. We had a great time. So I did enjoy a great Easter Sunday.
Did you do an Easter egg hunt?
We did not. Her boys, my niece's boys are almost teenagers now. Well, one is a teenager, and the other one is so close to being a teenager that we didn't do any Easter egg hiding or hunting this year. Everything was just inside. So again, with the pollen out, I didn't want to be outside anyway, so it worked out perfect for me.
Okay, all right. You got anything for us this morning?
I do. First of all, I want to say give condolences to Lou Gossett Jr., who's one of our biggest stars of film and television, who won an Academy Award for his performance in Officer and a Gentleman, has died at the age of 87. So that was a huge loss for us. He's one of my favorite actors, and Thom Gossett.
He is. But, I always, when I had, growing up, my name being Gossett, you always had to spell it.
Yes.
And a lot of people thought it was his name.
Yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed his work as well. He was fantastic, and of course he was fantastic in An Officer and a Gentleman.
Yes.
And in Roots.
And in Roots, I was going to say he was also won an Emmy for his performance in Roots, so he was truly
He was
a
the
great
fiddler,
actor.
right? Wasn't he? The fiddler, wasn't that his
The
name?
fiddler, yes.
He was great.
Yeah.
You know, I'd like to see that again and see how it's held up.
You're right.
You know,
I haven't seen it in a year. We used to replay it all the time on TV. I haven't noticed it lately, but yeah, I'm usually during Black History Month for sure. They run it again, but you can always go out there and find it. I'm sure on Netflix or something. Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead. You had something else for us?
Oh, I was just gonna. You were talking about the women's game last night. Women's basketball has just taken off to a whole new level. Yes,
it really has.
I'm happy to see.
The only thing that they don't do that the men do is jump and dunk.
Yeah, right.
But other than that, man, I was looking at that Caitlin woman, and then Juju, and then
Angel Reese.
Like, I hate to say, but they shoot like men. I mean, they can handle the ball. They've got jumpers. It's great.
Yes. They are playing the game with a lot of finesse these days, and used to, women just ran down the court and not many people paid much attention to it, but they have really changed the game, I would say. So I'm so proud of our ladies.
I don't know how you guys were in high school, but in high school, we had a divider in the gym. So the girls stayed on one side and the boys stayed on one side. And then when girls played, they would only play like half court.
We never even played basketball when I was in high school, Tom. But
really?
Never. We go inside the gym for gymnastics and things like that, but basketball wasn't even a game that the girls played. Yeah. It wasn't until I graduated high school that our high school had a women's basketball team.
Okay.
Yeah, so
we didn't have a team, but they played in the gym, when we were there.
I played in the backyard with my brothers, but never at school.
Well, let's get Michael Walker on here. Michael Walker, how are you, man?
I am doing well, TG. I hope you're feeling better. You too, Barbara.
I'm doing much better.
Good.
So what's happening in your world, Michael? Did you watch the game last night like everybody else?
I did. I checked it out. Yeah, I wanted to make a comment. Since we'll start with the game, I'll start with my comment on that. I agree with both of you all regarding the popularity and all the eyeballs that are on the women's basketball game. And they are playing a much better brand of basketball these days. And I commend them for that. But I think sometimes we kind of get carried away. A guy by the name of Rob Parker, who is a radio talk show host, used to be on First Take fame. And I guess that's what he's trying to do on his sports radio host show. He said Caitlin Clark should bypass the WNBA and go straight to the NBA and play there. So I guess he's just trying to get some comments. Some people just go a little bit too far. Now he is trying to support his theory based off of Ice Cube giving her an offer of $5 million to play in the 3-on-3 game. Right. And okay, that was not so much of a stretch. I can see that. But for Rob Parker now to say she should just bypass the WNBA and go to the NBA, and he's saying that they're soft now in the NBA and everybody can shoot threes and that's all they do and they don't play any defense. I still say that's a ridiculous comment for him to make. Yeah. And he really.
I was going to ask you if he's ever been to an NBA game.
Undoubtedly not.
And I'm not talking about watching on television. I'm talking about if you can go to the game and get a good seat. Yes. That is a physical sport.
Very physical.
Those guys are dribbling with one hand and he's whooping you with the other hand.
Right.
And it's a very, you wouldn't want to put Caitlin Clark out there with those guys.
No.
It would not be I just, you said he was on First Take. That's enough for me. So.
Yeah. Now I see why he's no longer on First Take, to be honest with you. making comments like that, you know.
Mhm.
The other thing, Tom, I'd like to comment, you brought up the Baltimore Bridge, and it's a couple of interesting things that's coming out of that. I've read where the owner of the ship is looking to invoke a law. It's an 1851 law, which is used to cap damages. Like it was used for the Titanic disaster in 1912. So basically what it is, it's a law that you can invoke in a catastrophic event like this, and you can cap the amount of damages that one would be liable for. And the early estimates are saying that the insurers that insured this vessel could be out of billions of dollars. And this law may save him about $1 billion or so because of all the losses.
And you may not have this answer, but so, okay, the ship gets sued.
The owner, yeah, the company that owns it.
That, in other words, if I'm shipping stuff, can I insure my own stuff that's on the ship?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
They actually encourage you to do so.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's much like when you're moving your goods from one place to another, like if you're moving a house and stuff, you have the option of putting insurance on it and doing valuables like that, because a lot of times the people that are transporting it do not have liability for it. I know it'd be different in the ship because you're talking about a lot more financial risk there. But yes, you can insure your stuff.
I was just curious because I would. They're getting 800,000 cars a year.
Right.
Somebody's got to put some insurance on them. Something.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And he had insurance as well. That, well, I say he is a company that owns the ship out of Singapore, but they had insurance. They were required to have insurance anyway.
Right.
Stuff like that. But you know, the deal is that each insurance policy has exclusions and limitations and all that type of stuff that's involved in the contract. And then there's a cap on the amount of insurance that's covered and what have you.
Right.
And I would say that probably in that particular situation, there are several insurance companies that came together to put together that insurance umbrella for that. But yet and still, because of the damages and everything, you know, he could really get it. You know, it's kind of like an accident, really. It wasn't like negligence. You know, if they lost power and what have you, but you get lawyers involved, they'll go back and say, well, it's your fault that you lost power and all kinds of stuff. You know, they'll shape an argument.
Well, Michael, one of the things that I read is normally a ship like that has two tugboats leading it, you know, but this ship didn't. So is there, I mean, wouldn't they be liable for not having a tug leading the ship like they normally should? What was the reason why they didn't have that? Do we know?
I don't know the reason why they didn't have it, but I don't know that a tugboat would do much good if the ship lost power itself and started to drift. You know, it'll take the tugboat with it, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. You know, the tugboat is really kind of to make sure that there is nothing encumbered in the way that they're going, you know, and looking out. But the ship lost power, and that's why it went into the frame and structure of the building. But ironically, I did read that some engineers from your alumni, your school, your alma mater, I should say, Auburn, they said part of the issue was that it wasn't any redundancy in the bridge. That bridge, I think, was built, I don't really remember, but it was a long time ago, like maybe, I don't know, 70s or 60s or something, but it was built before they started to do redundancy in bridge building.
Structure. Right.
Yes. And they're saying had it had complete redundancy, it would have survived that, but the bridge did not.
What do you mean when you say redundancy?
That's like, for instance, where if they build a frame right here to hold up a portion of the bridge, there's another one that's built right with it.
So it's like extra reinforcement.
To reinforce it, in other words. Back when I was in the telecommunications business and we did fiber optic loop around Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, we put in complete redundancy. Basically, we put in one loop of fiber from the air traffic control tower out to the radar station and back, came back and put another loop right behind that one to back it up. And all of the computer systems and multiplexers, we had double put in. So if one failed, the other one would be there.
Did you guys happen to see the press conference that the governor held?
I did.
Man, that
He
guy
was on point.
He was
Yes,
impressive. He
very.
really was.
You know, and that's the other comment that I wanted to make, Tom. I'm glad you brought that up because I agree with you. I think he handled himself very well. He presented himself as a strong, capable, and competent governor. But it's disappointing that in an incident like this, we have those in our society that are blaming this on DEI and saying this is a result of DEI, and they're calling the mayor, who happens to be a young African-American male, 39 years old, saying he's the DEI mayor of Baltimore. And the bridge collapse was due to DEI.
And how did they just come to that determination, Michael? Now that's odd.
Well, I understand. I agree with you because, you know, first of all, are you calling the people that own the ship DEI shippers? Is that what you're saying? Because
are you calling the people who voted for him? I mean, you know, people voted for him.
Right.
So, period. That's the end of that discussion.
Exactly.
Voted for him. They are duly elected, and the man seemed to be very, very competent to me.
Most
but, you
definitely.
know, I don't know. I'm not. The DEI thing, I think, is sort of played itself out.
It's interesting. He was on Face the Nation, CBS Face the Nation, and they asked him about the comments that are circulating that it's due to DEI and they're calling him the DEI mayor. And his response was, listen, I am a young black man and a young black mayor in this country. We know that there is a lot of racism. Folks who don't think I should be in this job. I know that. I've been black my whole life. I know how racism goes, but my focus is always going to be on those people. I am going to do my job. That's it. You know, he's focusing on the people that lost their lives and everything that's impacting the city of Baltimore as a result. And like I said, it's just disappointing that people will come up and say that. You know, it's no way you can come to a logical conclusion as to why they would say that.
Yeah.
Why I don't pay it any attention.
Right.
I just move on. You know?
I'm with you.
So, Barbara, you got anything else?
I do, Tom. I want to say congratulations to Tuskegee University. They received $6.7 million for a new flight school. So they received $6.7 million from the federal government, and so this will be used to train and on a field used by the Tuskegee Airmen. So that's a great deal for the university.
Good for Tuskegee.
Yes.
Yeah, I know they've had an airport down there for the longest, and
right.
They've been trying to get some things done. I think there's a little bit of communication back and forth with the Auburn Airport. So
right, I think they were working with them for a while. So it'll be interesting how that ties together now.
Students can be trained on it. That's great.
Yes.
Good for Tuskegee.
I think it's long overdue, you know,
really
to be honest,
is.
when you think about Red Tail and the flight, you know, the role that the Tuskegee Airmen played in the war and what have you, and were key reasons for the turnaround in that war. They were actually losing it until they allowed those pilots to join in and to kind of wait this long to give them support and what have you. I think is really a disservice, but as they say, it's better late than never, I guess.
I agree.
Okay, anything else, you guys?
Well, one quick thing. There are people that are upset with the Fannie Willis case and the fact that the judge didn't make her resign from the case and what have you, and the choice, and we talked about it, but it's funny now that the judge has asked Fannie Willis not to mention or invoke race in this case, in this decision. Do not talk about race. And Fannie said she's going to talk about it anyway. I find it odd that he would say, do not speak of race, other than the fact that some of the things that happened had to do with race.
Right.
Otherwise, why would you bring that up? You know?
Yeah. What was the point?
Yeah, I agree. Why would you tell her not to do that if it didn't have anything? But I think a lot of times in situations like that, high profile cases and the way things go down, people have an idea that they may not have gone down the way that they did had race not been a factor. And that's all I can come to the conclusion, is that he realizes that, otherwise he wouldn't say it.
Well, we'll see where that goes. I'm interested to see how it all plays out, how she does, and versus all the other lawyers. Well, they got about 18 lawyers on the other side.
Right.
That effect. So,
Yeah.
should be.
And those lawyers are in a relationship, by the way. A lot of the lawyers on Trump's defense team, they are in a relationship, but that's not a conflict of interest. No. I'm just saying.
All right, we got anything else? Okay, well let's go on and go to Sean, and because she's got a minute for us. Sean.
Good morning to everyone joining in with us. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute. Hello, April. Tell me everything. April is a time to usher in spring and celebrate new beginnings. It also brings awareness to autism, stress, and what it means to feng shui. And today, I'm going to share my most favorite part of the day, and that is brunch. This month is National Brunch Month, a time where we celebrate the foods, beverages, and places we go for that meal that's in between breakfast and lunch. Many restaurants and pubs offer brunch to their patrons. These buffets offer something for everyone, including signature dishes, cocktails, and traditional brunch fare. You can expect eggs, fresh baked breads, waffles, fruit salads, and much more. And you can't forget the beverages, the coffees, the juices, the teas, the champagnes, mimosas, and Bloody Marys all make the list. Though brunch doesn't require a special occasion, it does include the element of friends and family. And what's better than that? Celebrate all April long with National Brunch Month. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Shantia Jones, and this has Got a Minute.
Thank you, Sean. I guess you tried to make us all hungry here this morning. So that was good. Thank you very much. All right, so let's go with our G-List guest today. Hollywood has the A-List, and here on Tuesdays with Thom, we have the G-List. And our G-List guest today is a man named Paul South. Paul is has had an award-winning career as a journalist, has covered everything from college football to Congress to Hurricane Katrina. And so he was also an Auburn University football manager from 1977 to 1979 under Coach Doug Barfield. And there's a great Doug Barfield story there for us. So, Paul, how are you, man? Come on in here.
I'm doing great, Thom. How are you? Thank you for having me this morning.
You're very welcome. We can't. There you go. All right. So we're glad to have you this morning. I think Barbara's going to start off with a question for you. Barbara?
Good morning, Paul. Thank you for joining us this morning. I do have a question for you. I understand that you served as a football manager from 1977 through 79, but you recently received something that you should have earned back 40 years ago, over 40 years ago as a manager. Tell us about that whole experience and what happened.
Yeah, you're breaking up on me a bit. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was asking you about the.
Yeah, it's a great story. I think I get the.
I don't know what
The
that
letter
was.
jacket.
Yes.
You're still breaking up. I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, that was, and I still get emotional thinking about it because, I was the manager from 1977 to 79 and got passed over for a letter because, and I don't want to, but there was somebody in authority who had decision-making power over which of the managers got letters. And he didn't like me because the guy told me, he said, the only people on crutches that need to be on the football field are hurt football players. And I walk on crutches by virtue of mild cerebral palsy. And so I was passed over. And somehow that word got to one of the guys who was on the team when I was there. And he and Mark Murphy, the former editor of Inside the Auburn Tigers, cooked up a little scheme. And about 3 years ago, Mark called me and said, I've got an assignment for you that's really big, and you need to come down here and talk with me. We've got to meet about this. It's going to take a while. So I come down. We walk into a room at the restaurant in the conference center. Players, former managers who served with me, and they said, your seat's right over here. And on the back of that seat was my letter jacket.
Oh.
And I find that the older I get, I'm 67 now, I find that the older I get, the more that my eyes leak, if you know what I mean. And
Yes.
that was very emotional. And I was so proud and so humbled by it. And, people don't often talk about Coach Barfield's time at Auburn. But had it not been for Doug Barfield, I would not be a manager. I would have never been a manager. Because I was interviewing him for a story for the Plainsman, and I said, Coach, I've been to every assistant coach, and I'm sorry? About Coach Barfield?
No, go ahead. You're fine.
I was interviewing him at the end of spring training in 1977. I was assigned to interview him to sort of do a spring training wrap-up story. And at the end of it, I said, Coach, I really shouldn't ask you this, but I want to do something to help this team. And would you have a job for me? And I've talked to all the other coaches, and they've all said, oh, you could get hurt out there. We don't know about that. And Coach said, I think we've got something for you. And so that following August, I started as a football manager. And I'm just so thankful to all the coaches and all the guys who served as managers with me. They were all so accepting, and we're a brotherhood. I mean, that's bottom line. And just to have been a small part of that, because when you're a kid growing up in Alabama, especially if you're a young boy, you want to play for Auburn or Alabama, and that was not in the cards for me. But I kind of think it's one of those things where when you're a manager, you have to learn to be a servant of other people. You have to have a servant's heart. So instead of winning the Heisman Trophy, I got to be the guy who schlepped the Gatorade, but I wouldn't trade anything for it.
That's great. Great. Thank you.
That's an interesting story. So that is, and Coach Barfield was, he was a guy with a big heart, and he was offensive coordinator my last year.
Yep.
And, just really enjoyed working with him, and he was a fun guy.
There is a funny. Can I share a funny? I'm sorry to interrupt, but
yeah. Go ahead.
Could I share a funny story?
Go ahead.
To tell you about the way that the guys were, and they they were very accepting of my disability, and we had a lot of good-natured fun with it. We had an offensive coordinator my last year named Alex Gibbs, and Coach Gibbs was the inventor of what's now known as zone blocking, and he was the offensive coordinator on a couple of Super Bowl winning teams in Denver and that. And we had a lineman named Jim Scuthan, who is a dear friend of mine. He's he's federal public defender in Orlando. And he told me a story that I had never heard. But one time they're in the film room, and they're showing a play, and Jim blocks a guy, and then he falls down. He gets up, he blocks another guy, and he falls down. He gets up, he blocks a third guy, and he falls down. And Coach Gibbs stops the film and says, "Jim, have you been hanging out with Paul South too long? You can't walk either." So I just thought that was hysterically funny.
Yes.
But it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade anything for it.
That's good.
Right.
I agree with you. Coach Barfield probably didn't get the credit that he deserves. He came in and recruited a lot of guys, and he came in after Coach Jerd, who had been there for 20-some odd years and 25 years. And so anytime you follow somebody like that, it's tough on you, and people were very, very tough on him. I'll tell you a quick Barfield story. I was coming back. I'd run downfield for something or whatever, and I was coming back to the huddle, and I looked down, and there was a quarter laying on the field. So I picked the quarter up and ran over there and gave it to Coach Barfield. I said, "Coach, hang on to this quarter. I'm going to get it back from you after the game. It's a good luck quarter." And he looked at me like I was crazy. But, I like it. Good man.
Well,
So
Paul,
tell
Coach is a great man, and I owe him.
Tell us about covering Hurricane Katrina. What was your assignment there with Hurricane Katrina?
Well, at the time, I was the managing editor of the Mississippi Press, which was a paper in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And our newsroom took on 8 feet of water during Hurricane Katrina. I was the managing editor and the editorial page editor at the time, and we had only a skeleton crew. Our staff was normally about 23 people in the newsroom, but because many people had evacuated and had to secure their homes and that, we had 7 people. There was our executive editor, Steve Cox, who was also an Auburn alumnus, who's a great friend and journalism mentor to me, and our reporters and a couple of photographers. Unfortunately, we had some photographers who lived in Mobile, so they were able to come to work. And the thing I'm most proud of is that we did not miss a day of publication in print or online during Hurricane Katrina, and there were only 2 newspapers on the Gulf Coast that could claim that, us and the Seacoast Echo in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. But the thing I'll never forget about it is we actually lived in the Mobile Register building for about a month, sleeping on air mattresses on the floor. But that first day that we took papers out, and we literally took a truck, drove a bunch of papers over, and we were going up and down the streets in Pascagoula, putting papers in people's hands. And we went to one of the local churches, and there were like 500 people lined up for a hot meal because one of the church denominations had set up. I mean, the churches were on the ground in Mississippi and in New Orleans before the federal government or anybody else. And we were handing out papers, and I had people coming up to me with tears in their eyes and saying, "Thank you so much. We finally can know what's going on." And Shoot, it's been since 2005, and it still gets me. But like my boss, Steve Cox, lost literally everything he had. His family lost everything. We had several of our staff members who lost everything, and yet they continued to work and continued to put the paper in. And I told my dying breath, that will be my proudest moment in journalism. And I do have to share a story. I had a dear friend and who was a colleague there, who was one of our best reporters, Natalie Chambers, who would always remind me that she shared the alma mater with Walter Payton. She'd gone to Jackson State. And she went to an appearance, the first George Bush, George H.W. Bush, and Bill Clinton came to Grand Bay, Alabama, just to meet with everyday people. And after they met with those people, Natalie sat down with former President Clinton and former President Bush and interviewed them. And then one of them asked her, what about your family, Natalie? And her house had been severely damaged, and she had an elderly mother, and she just broke down and started to cry. And both those men, who at one time were the most powerful people in the world, put their arms around her and said, "We're going to get you some help." I'm sorry, y'all. This is it's a very emotional issue for me to talk about. But just to see Natalie's courage in the face of all that, and she told me afterwards, she said, "I'm going to need a minute before I can write," because she said, "I grew up in Moss Point, Mississippi, when segregation was in full hold." And she said, "I never would have imagined that one day I would have two former presidents of the United States put their arms around me and tell me they were going to help my family."
Great.
I mean, you don't forget things like that.
No,
You just don't.
that's a hell of a
And
Michael, you got a question for Paul?
Yes. Since we're kind of talking about former presidents, Paul, I noticed that you served time as a political communications advisor. So I'd like to ask you, what type of political communication advice would you give to former President Trump? And then what type of advice would you give to the current president, Joe Biden?
I'm sorry, you broke up on me a bit, Michael. I apologize, but advice concerning what?
What type of political communications would you give former President Trump as he tried?
Well, I can just speak. Well, I could get really political and very biased here, and my journalist heart won't allow me to do that. But I've got some very clear advice that I'd like to give to Donald Trump, because he is the first president in my lifetime in the history of this country who ever made a disparaging remark about people with disabilities. So you can kind of see where my thoughts lie concerning the former president. So, my advice to him, if I were his communications person, I'd tell him to shut up. Because he's a damaging individual, and he's a damaged individual.
Thank you, Paul.
I think that would be excellent advice.
I think what he has done in this country to divide people, to create enemies around every corner, whether it's the African American community, whether it's the LGBTQ plus community, whether it's people with disabilities, anybody that's different, that doesn't meet his standard, whatever that may be. Because now he's selling Bibles, and I think he reads a different version of the Bible than the one that
and
I
tennis
read or
shoes.
most people read.
Yeah. I don't think he's reading the Bible.
And tennis shoes. I mean,
Paul,
Paul,
let me.
or the version he's reading is not a great translation.
Right.
So
But
Paul,
you asked about President Biden. One thing that frustrates me is, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
Go ahead,
President
man.
Biden needs to get out more and be himself. He needs to be himself and get out there and be aggressive and talk about what he has done for this country in terms of the economy, in terms of what he's done to try to bring this country together. And I'm not seeing a lot of force from him. And I'd really like to see that. I mean, I'm kind of an old school guy. If it's almost like, the movie The Untouchables?
Yeah.
There's a scene in The Untouchables where Sean Connery and Kevin Costner are in a church. And Sean Connery says to him, he says, when they take out one of your guys with a knife, you bring a gun. And it's time to play hardball. I mean, I really think President Biden needs to be tougher. That's what I would do. That's what I'd advise.
Barbara, you got something else?
I do. Paul, I understand that you have pinned our dear friend, Mr. Gossam, with a special name. Can you tell us what that name is and why you gave him that name?
I'm sorry.
You've pinned.
I missed the question because it broke up. I'm sorry, Barbara.
That's okay. That's okay. I was going to say, I understand you have given our dear friend, Mr. Gossam, Thom Gossam, a special title, a special name. Can you tell us what that is and why you gave him that name?
Yeah. Yes. He's the dean, because the best I can determine, he is the dean of African American football players at Auburn. Now, the previous dean was someone from my hometown, the late great James Owens, and I've known the Owens family my entire life. I'm from Fairfield, Alabama, where James was from, and his sister Ella and I went to high school together. So now Thom is the dean of African American scholarship football players. And I've called him that. I don't know where I got that. Because he mentioned to me one time that he was the oldest living African American scholarship football player at Auburn. And I said, well, that makes you the dean. I think I'm telling that story correctly, aren't I, Thom?
Yeah, I think you are.
Right.
Yeah. And every time I talk to you since then,
it fits. And Thom and I met actually. Yeah.
Go ahead, Thom.
Yeah, and and Thom and I go back a ways. Even I didn't know him he was at Auburn before me a little bit, but I met him when he was a young sports reporter and videographer at Channel 42 in Birmingham, and I was doing my journalism internship, and we met at the renewal of the SEC tournament in 1979. I remember it vividly. So
that's great.
I enjoyed that job. That was a fun job. I got to do a lot of stuff there.
I did too.
Got to cover President Carter and Annette Sheehan and a lot of things that some of them weren't as pleasant.
Yeah, during my internship, I made $50 a week and got lunch on Mondays, and it's the best job I ever had, because they would send me on weekends to Lexington to cover a basketball game, Ole Miss to cover a basketball game, Auburn, Tuscaloosa, Nashville. I mean, I couldn't believe that I was so fortunate. It was great fun.
So, and you suffered from cerebral palsy. Is that what it was? Your disability.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so let me ask you something. When people talk about, and Michael talked about this earlier, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they don't seem to include people with disabilities, which is a part of that. And what's your feelings
People with
about
this. Yeah. And yeah, they don't. And that's troubling to me, because if you think about disability, that crosses every line.
Right.
Rich, poor, black, white, Hispanic, LGBTQ, you name it. And the unemployment rate among people with disabilities in this country is about 15%.
Wow.
You can imagine if the unemployment rate was 15% nationwide, there it would be
Yeah.
people in the streets. But that's never really seemed to be a priority for administrations, and it's surprising, given that one of the greatest presidents this country ever produced, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, had a disability, suffered from polio, and led us from the Great Depression and through World War II. And I mean, we've had steps forward like the Americans with Disabilities Act, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. I mean, and like I said, this transcends political affiliation, race, gender, any of those things. Disability touches every corner of our communities, and so.
I think that's something that we don't think about, because when we've had all this talk recently about DEI, and it basically centers around what people consider to be unqualified people for jobs, and the very fact that we've got people who go ahead, Paul.
No, I to your point, I have to give a shout out to my late parents, who were, when I was born, my dad was 20, my mom was 19. And when they found out that I had CP, we had a family meeting. They had a family meeting with my grandparents, and they said, it was my grandmother shared this story with me years later and said, they said to us, it was the shortest family meeting ever, because they said, we're gonna encourage him and allow him to try whatever he wants to try. We're gonna find out what his abilities are and push him to do the best he can. We're not gonna coddle him. We're not gonna lock him away. We're not gonna institutionalize him, which was a big thing to do back in Alabama in the 1950s and early 60s. My mom and dad had to fight like hell in my early years so that I could get access to public education, because there was no such thing as mainstreaming. There was no such thing as special education back in those days. And it's, when you hear about things like people railing against DEI, that gives me chills, because that says that the state of Alabama believes that I'm less of a citizen than somebody who can walk around normally, or this or that. And it's maddening. It feels to me like we're backing up as a society. And when you see Donald Trump making fun of Serge Kovaleski, who has cerebral palsy and is a reporter, when you see him and people give him a pass on that, I have many friends who are Trump supporters, and I ask them the question. I'll say, well, that kind of raises a question in my heart. If you can support him, how what do you really, if you give him a pass on that remark about Mr. Kovaleski, what do you feel deep down about me? as a person with a disability, do you think that's appropriate to make fun of a person like who has a disability? And they say, well, you're different. Well,
Yeah.
no, I'm really not.
Right.
So
I'm gonna,
it's a troubling thing.
excuse me for laughing, but I that was what people used to say long time ago. You know, when integration first happened in the schools, they said, "Well, Gossam, you different," you know, and so I don't know what made me any different, but I'm with you, man, and it's something that, and I'm going to be honest with you, something I don't think
Yeah.
about when people talk about DEI and people who are disabled. But I think, you know, there are buildings on campus still that if you've got a disability, you can't really get into those buildings
Right.
because there's no elevators, there's no ramp
No.
to get you in. And so, yeah, you know, when we talk about DEI, there's a lot there
Yeah.
that we're not dealing with. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Paul.
Tom, I can tell you a story at Auburn. And yeah, I can tell you a story at Auburn when I had an advanced reporting project for, I believe it was for Mr. Gillis Morgan, who was a wonderful professor here. And it was pre the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I wrote a piece on accessibility at Auburn. And I went to meet with one of the higher ups who's in charge of facilities at Auburn. And there was no elevator in Sanford Hall. So I had to take the steps. And so I sat down with this individual and I said to him, sir, how's Auburn doing in terms of accessibility for its students? And he goes into this soliloquy about, we're not doing all that we should. And but we've made a lot of progress. And he talked about Haley Center and he talked about all of this. And then I said, well, sir, that's all very well and good, but why did I just have to climb 5 flights of steps to get to your office? And the interview quickly ended at that.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a never ending thing. I used to joke with people, they'd say, well, Paul, how come it took so long, to get the Americans with Disabilities Act? I said, well, we're kind of at a disadvantage. We couldn't really protest. We'd walk a couple blocks and get tired and decide to go have a beer. So, and people kind of look at me and say, is he serious? And of course I'm joking. This is a very serious thing, but it has taken a long time and it hasn't gone nearly as far as it needs to go. As far as, because I had editors at newspapers, basically say, no, we're not going to run the risk of you falling down some bleacher steps to hire you. I mean, and they would tell other people that, and that would get back to me. But I mentioned Steve Cox earlier. Steve Cox was one of those people who took a gamble and said, yeah, this guy can do the job. And there are a number of people that I can mention. And the thing about it is, kind of just backtrack a little and forgive me for rambling. But, when I sat down with Jack Sims the first time to talk about the Auburn journalism program, he never once said to me, maybe you should try something a little less physically demanding, like accounting or something. It never entered his mind. And Jack and David Housel and Gillis Morgan and Mickey Logue and Mr. Burnett, they all put the same expectation on me that they put on everybody else, which was what I wanted. You just want to be treated like everybody else. Because, my disability is part of who I am. I'd be lying if I said otherwise, but it doesn't define me. Doesn't define me as a person. Never has, never will.
I appreciate you being with us, and I appreciate the points you're making. And those professors' names you just called out, Mickey Logue and those guys, Dr. Burnett, they were good. They were great professors. I enjoyed my time with them and learning from them. And So I'm glad you're with us, man. I think it makes a difference when people think about
Well,
some of the things
it's
other people say and do.
it's a great honor. Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
It's a great honor with you all. I mean, I sort of feel like the old line from George Goebel one time. Huh? I thought about it with you all this morning, and George Goebel had a great line. Sorry.
I don't know what that
George
is.
Goebel
Man.
had a great
Go
line.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. We've got
Go
a
ahead.
delay. I think that's part of our problem. But there was a great line. There was a episode of Johnny Carson one night, and Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. and Bob Hope are all on, and George Goebel, the comedian, comes out and he looks up and down the couch and he says, "Boy," he said, "you've got all the heavy hitters here. I don't know why I'm here." He said, "Have you ever been in a closet? Have you ever felt like that you're in a closet full of tuxedos and you're a pair of brown shoes?" And that's sort of how I feel being on this panel. I mean, this is really something, and I'm just honored to have been here today. Thank you.
We appreciate you being here. Appreciate you sharing with us. Anybody got anything else before we have to close it out?
Well, thank you.
I just want to say, Paul, thank you very much for coming on and sharing your stories with us and your position on matters of interest, especially DEI. We on the TWT show have always said DEI is more than just about ethnic backgrounds. It encompasses all the things that we talked about today. So we certainly appreciate that.
Ditto. Thank you.
I think if somebody would raise
that means a lot. Thank you very much.
I think if you raise the disability issue with some of the people in the Senate and the House down there in Montgomery, they would probably say, "Oh, well, we didn't mean them."
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
They don't think, man. They don't think past Facebook. You know.
Yeah.
Paul, I appreciate you being with us, man.
I know we're pushing on time, but do you know? Thank you. It's a great honor for me to be here, Thom. Anything for you, my brother. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it.
And it was so nice to meet you too. Also,
Nice to meet you as well.
Miss Barbara and Michael. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I'll see you next time I'm in town there, man. We'll get together. So I'm going to close out here. Well, I want to say my closing comment for today, or as I see it. I want to say congratulations to my wife, Joyce Gilly Gossam, and her selection as one of the inaugural women, excuse me, as Transformational Leaders event at our alma mater, Illinois State University in Bloomington, Illinois. Joyce and two other women alumni were selected for the inaugural program sponsored by the Provost Office on the Illinois State campus. Dr. Gossam, as she is known professionally, is a graduate of the College of Education and has professional experience as a special education teacher, an elected official, an organizational consultant, a leadership coach, and a higher education administrator. The three alumni spent 2 days on campus. The program stressed the importance of talking about women as transformational leaders. Effective women leaders empower others to lead. And that's our show for today. We want to thank, we appreciate you. Thank our G-List guest, Paul South. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl Inc. Thanks again to the TWT team, Barbara, Sean, Emily, and Michael, and Joyce. And where am I here? And that's it for this April the 2nd. Remember, a day without a smile is a day wasted. If you've got an extra one, give one to someone else today. Enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe. Peace.